Tonight, we open with a disclosure Western intelligence agencies feared for months, quietly anticipated, and prepared for behind closed doors, but never expected to unfold this fast. Not over weeks, not over months. Over hours, a matter of hours that altered the trajectory of this war and sent shockwaves straight into the Kremlin. Because what Ukraine revealed today didn't just cross a line Moscow hoped would never be touched. It erased it. And when that boundary collapsed, Vladimir Putin had no immediate answer. Before we go any further, if you want to understand moments that actually change wars, not just headlines like this video, and subscribe. Now, you're going to want to stay with this. For the first time since the invasion began, Russia appears genuinely blindsided. Not by Western weapons, not by NATO intelligence, but by something Ukraine developed on its own. A domestic capability, so precise, so unexpected, and so disruptive that the Kremlin's first response wasn't denial, it was silence. And silence, in Moscow, usually means panic. For months, there had been quiet signals, not announcements, not press briefings, just whispers inside intelligence circles that Ukraine was working on something different, something outside the familiar pattern. Ukraine's military operations had always shown resilience, but also predictability, a rhythm Russian analysts believed they understood. Then that rhythm vanished. Western intelligence officers know what that looks like. Sudden surges in encrypted communications, restricted access at facilities in Western Ukraine, scientific personnel quietly disappearing from public records, satellite imagery showing unusual activity at locations previously considered dormant, power consumption spikes where no major industry exists, convoys moving only at night under heavy concealment. All of it went dark weeks ago. And when Ukraine goes quiet, it usually means something very loud is coming. Russian intelligence noticed the anomalies. They reported them, but they couldn't identify what Ukraine was building. Moscow assumed it was another drone variant, or Western systems being assembled locally, familiar threats, manageable threats. That assumption was wrong. What Ukraine was preparing was entirely domestic. And today, the world saw it for the first time. In the early hours this morning, Ukrainian defense planners identified what they described as a rare operational window. Weather conditions, Russian air defense positioning, and satellite coverage aligned in a way that had not occurred in months. These windows don't come twice. Ukraine didn't hesitate. And if this already sounds serious, make sure you're subscribed, because this is where the war takes a sharp turn. Shortly before dawn, Ukraine launched what officials describe as a newly developed, jet-powered long-range strike system, a weapon designed not just to hit targets, but to bypass assumptions Russia built its defenses around. Unlike Western-supplied systems Moscow has studied for years, this platform operated on characteristics Russian air defense networks were not tuned to recognize its flight profile was irregular. Its radar signature minimal, its speed well beyond what Ukraine had previously fielded. Analysts reviewing early footage described it as a leap forward one that normally takes years of testing and iteration. Ukraine did it in secrecy. The target was not symbolic. It was selected to send a message. A message to Vladimir Putin that distance no longer guarantees safety. That message was received. Russia's response today was anything but routine. State media usually quick to downplay or deny waited hours before acknowledging the strike. Hours of silence, hours of confusion, hours during which Russian officials reportedly scrambled to understand what had just happened. Sources familiar with Russian military communications described the reaction as disoriented. The system was unexpected, its performance troubling, and most concerning of all, there was no immediate counter. And denial only works when evidence is unclear. Today, it wasn't verified footage showed a strike executed with extraordinary precision. This wasn't luck. This wasn't a lucky gap. It was deliberate, calculated, and planned. Within hours, Western officials reacted cautiously, but clearly U.S. defense officials described the development as significant. British analysts privately acknowledged it altered threat calculations. NATO observers admitted Ukraine's domestic engineering capacity had been underestimated. In Moscow, the narrative unraveled quickly. Russian military commentators, normally reliable amplifiers of Kremlin messaging, began asking uncomfortable questions. How did Ukraine build this undetected? Why didn't Russian air defenses respond in time? How many more systems exist? Those questions don't have reassuring answers. And here's why this matters strategically. The strike reportedly hit a logistics coordination hub deep inside Russian-controlled territory, not near the border, not symbolic infrastructure. A facility supporting supply lines, communications, and command coordination for active Russian operations. It was reinforced because Moscow believed it was out of reach. That belief was wrong. Ukraine didn't just damage hardware. It targeted the nervous system communications, fuel coordination, and command structures that allow everything else to function. Russia can replace equipment, it can rotate personnel, but rebuilding coordinated logistics under pressure is far harder. That disruption ripples forward. And this wasn't accidental. Ukrainian engineers designed the system to exploit known weaknesses in Russian air defense networks, response times, coverage gaps, radar limitations. This is what happens when a country fighting for survival concentrates its best minds on one problem. They adapt, they innovate, they surprise. And today, Ukraine demonstrated something Moscow has spent years trying to prevent: unpredictability. But this story doesn't stop at a single strike, because intelligence analysts now believe Russia's recent escalations were meant to test Ukraine and its allies to see if fatigue had set in, if support would weaken, if uncertainty would create hesitation. Instead, Ukraine responded by revealing a capability no one expected, and that forced a recalculation. Russian planners are now reassessing assumptions they relied on since the early days of the war: that Ukraine would remain reactive, that its reach would stay limited, that its innovation curve would lag behind Russia's. None of that looks true anymore. And this is where the stakes rise even higher. Because today wasn't just about what Ukraine hit, it was about what Ukraine proved: that it can develop advanced systems independently, that it can strike deeper than expected, and that it no longer needs permission to change the battlefield. As more details emerge, one thing is already clear: this was not a one-off demonstration. It was an announcement that the rules have changed. And when rules change in war, those who fail to adapt fast enough pay the price. The Kremlin is quiet tonight, too quiet. And when Vladimir Putin goes quiet, it usually means calculations are being made under pressure, under scrutiny, and under fear, because whatever comes next, one truth is unavoidable. Ukraine just showed it has capabilities Russia did not anticipate, and this war will not proceed the way Moscow planned. And this is where the consequences begin to compound, because what Ukraine demonstrated today wasn't just a single strike. It was a revelation one that forced every major intelligence service to reevaluate assumptions they've relied on since the early stages of this war. Assumptions about reach, about capability, about control. And if you're still watching, make sure you're subscribed, because this next phase is where miscalculations become dangerous. Western analysts now believe this development exposes a far deeper problem for Moscow. Russian air defense doctrine is built on predictability: known systems, known profiles, known countermeasures. Ukraine just introduced something that doesn't fit the model. That means Russia isn't just reacting to damage. It's reacting to uncertainty. Within hours of the strike, Russian military channels began reporting emergency repositioning of air defense units. Threat assessments were updated. Commanders requested revised coverage maps. In other words, Russia is scrambling to protect territory it previously believed was secure. That is not a small adjustment. That is a structural shock, because defending front lines is one thing. Defending depth hundreds of kilometers of territory is something else entirely. It drains resources. It stretches response times. It forces trade-offs. Every system move to protect one region leaves another exposed. And Ukraine knows this. What makes this moment especially destabilizing is the timing. Russia's recent escalations were designed to apply pressure while Ukraine faced political uncertainty among its supporters. Moscow believed fatigue was setting in, that Ukraine would remain constrained. That time favored the larger force. Instead, Ukraine unveiled a capability that flipped the psychological equation. Military analysts now describe Russia's position as reactive rather than controlling. And that shift matters. Wars are not decided only by territory or firepower, but by initiative, by who forces the other side to respond. Today, Ukraine sees that initiative, and this wasn't just about technology, it was about message discipline. Ukraine didn't leak this, it didn't tease it, it didn't test it publicly. It revealed it through action. That's the kind of move designed to force reassessment, not headlines. If you're finding this analysis useful, hit like right now. It helps this reach people who don't realize how much just changed. As more information surfaced throughout the day, the scale of Ukraine's program became clearer. Intelligence sources indicate this system is not singular. Variants are reportedly in development, optimized for different target profiles. Range extensions, payload adjustments, production scaling. This was not a prototype. It was a deployment. And that distinction is critical because it tells Russia something deeply uncomfortable. Ukraine is no longer just responding to this war. It is shaping it. That was never part of Putin's plan. He expected Ukraine to exhaust itself, to rely indefinitely on foreign systems, to remain constrained by permissions and limitations. Instead, Ukraine has built something that removes several of those constraints at once. A domestically controlled capability, designed, produced, and deployed without external approval. That changes the calculus for everyone, and it comes at a dangerous moment for the Kremlin. Putin is facing pressure on multiple fronts: military hardliners demanding results, economic elites demanding stability, families demanding answers, propaganda outlets demanding victories. Leaders under that kind of pressure do not make calm decisions. They make rushed ones, reactive ones. Decisions driven by fear of appearing weak. That is why the coming days matter so much. Putin must now explain how Russian intelligence missed this, why air defenses failed, why territory once considered safe no longer is. These are not questions with convenient answers. And in authoritarian systems, unanswered questions often trigger internal instability. Ukraine understands this dynamic. That's why today's announcement was framed carefully. Ukrainian leadership emphasized domestic innovation, national capability, strategic independence, not just survival, but transformation. President Zelensky described this moment as proof that Ukrainian ingenuity is stronger than Russian aggression. That message wasn't just for Ukrainians, it was for Moscow. And here's the part that should concern Russian planners the most. This strike did not occur in isolation. Alongside it, Ukraine increased drone activity. Cyber operations reportedly intensified. Border pressure increased. Multiple domains moved in parallel. When Ukraine coordinates across fronts, it signals preparation, not improvisation. That forces Russia into defensive mode. Analysts are now debating what comes next. Is this shaping operations for a larger offensive? Is it designed to drain Russian resources? Is it meant to influence diplomatic positioning? The answer may be all three. What matters is that Ukraine acted first. They didn't wait. They didn't ask. They didn't delay. And in war, momentum belongs to those who act decisively. Now, Russia faces a race. Develop counters before Ukraine scales production or accept a new reality where Ukrainian reach continues to expand. Neither option is comfortable. Both require time Russia may not have. And time increasingly is not on Moscow's side. Intelligence monitoring suggests Russian commanders are requesting urgent reassessments. Defensive assets are being redistributed. And recent escalatory rhetoric is now being viewed through a different lens, not confidence, but compensation. Ukraine, meanwhile, is accelerating. Today's strike was precise. It was unexpected, and it was disruptive in exactly the way military planners fear most. It undermined assumptions rather than just assets, and as details continue to emerge, one thing is already clear: this was not meant to end the war. It was meant to redefine it. What happens next depends on choices made in the Kremlin. Escalation carries risks. Hesitation carries risks. And uncertainty now dominates Russian planning. The Kremlin is quiet tonight, unusually quiet, and when Vladimir Putin is quiet, it usually means something is coming. Because tonight he was reminded of a lesson this war has taught repeatedly. Ukraine will adapt, Ukraine will innovate. And Ukraine will find ways to fight that Russia did not anticipate. This story is far from over, but one truth is already undeniable. Ukraine's capabilities have entered a new phase, Russia's assumptions have collapsed, and this war will never return to what it was before today. Stay informed, and don't look away, and don't look away.